And staff, it would be great if you could share the screen for the website if possible. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's an organization funded by the European Union to create educational material for young individuals. And IceCap is one of their various projects, which is already 3/4 of the way through a 2-year project. And it's leading 7 EU partner organizations.
Sorry, Sally, I'm having trouble with the screen share, so we'll have to do it another time.
Great, so I think I'm just going to share the information then by the web through the chat, so you can have a look at the website yourselves. But basically their aim is to inspire families to make small but effective changes to make them aware of how their actions affect the environment and the circular economy. So this website platform is an extensive suite of materials, which they will provide you with a single and easy to use platform, and easy to use, adapt, and it can range from grandparents to young children as well. Anyone could basically use it, and it allows you to feel empowered. And all of the materials will be published in July, where a conference will be held at Impact Hub King's Cross, and you're all invited to it. So if there's any information you'd like to learn more about, or you're interested to join or participate within their trial, I'll just share Diana's email and contact information in the chat box. Perfect. And I know we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm just going to pass it over to Stav, our experimental and hub expert within the hub, and it'll be great if you could kick us off.
Thanks, Sally. Thank you everyone for joining today. As Sally mentioned, this is our 4th environmental talk at Impact Hub, and this is a partnership that we've gone on board because we really want to help people in the community, whether it's local or digital or global, in taking action to protect our planet. So with all of these talks, we usually have a focus on individual actions and the things that we can do as individuals to take action and help our planet. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to look at air pollution in a little bit more detail and talk about where it comes from. Tom Parks from Camden Council is going to be leading that. Then we're going to go into a breakout session where we have a really great activity for everyone to participate in with some of our fantastic facilitators who are here to support us. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about solutions and things that we can do as individuals to take on air pollution. So it's a really exciting day to be talking about air pollution because, as all of you know, it is Earth Day. So we're really happy to be covering this issue. Earth Day was actually founded in 1970, actually by a senator in the US in Wisconsin who wanted to help get people thinking about air pollution and environmental issues and how to tackle them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tom Parks from Camden Council, who's going to talk to us about air pollution in more detail. So Tom, here you are.
Thank you, Stav. And thanks, Sally, also for inviting me to talk here today. Yeah, I'm Tom Parks, the Senior Air Quality Officer at Camden Council. So I lead on Camden's policy and projects on air pollution and how we try and protect public health. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Stav. Thank you. So I'll start with a really kind of brief overview, hopefully, of why air pollution is something that local authorities care about and why it's important for everyone's health. When we talk about air pollution in the 21st century, we are talking about gases and particles in the air which can damage our health in one way or another. Generally speaking, we're talking about one of 3 different things. So you've probably seen lots in the news about this already, but you know, nitrogen dioxide, which is an invisible gas from burning fuels in engines and in cooking facilities, that kind of thing. So gas boilers and vehicles. Particulate matter, a bit more of a kind of abstract concept, but this is all different types of airborne tiny particles, which come again from burning things, but also from materials when they're crushed or broken. And we're also talking about volatile organic compounds, which is essentially just chemicals in the air from various different chemical products. And collectively, these different types of air pollutants have various different long-term and short-term impacts on our health. It's generally considered that about 40,000 deaths each year in the UK come about from exposure to air pollution over the long term, and about 4,000 of those being in London. And the kind of the range of effects that pollution has on the body, I mean, it's a huge range of different impacts affecting various different bodily systems, from the minor end of the spectrum, so kind of minor respiratory inflammation and kind of wheezing and tightness in the chest, due to much more serious health conditions like, reduced lung capacity, cardiovascular and other respiratory diseases, all the way through to lung cancer as well. So clearly air pollution does have a serious effect on health throughout life. And there's some key points at the end of the slide here. It can affect us even if we don't notice it at any one particular time. It affects us throughout our lives. And it's not just about premature death, but it reduces quality of life and well-being as well. And everyone's at risk from air pollution, but some people are more vulnerable to the worst effects of exposure to air pollution as well. So going back to the point about vulnerabilities, some, kind of clearly some people are most vulnerable due to kind of sensitive health. So that would include children, young people, pregnant women, and people with any existing conditions. So any respiratory or heart conditions, which might predispose people to being more affected by additional exposure to air pollution as well. And then there are additional vulnerabilities based upon people's exposure to pollution as well. So not just about whether they have sensitive health, but also if they are in environments a lot of the time where there is more air pollution. So that could be due to occupation, so construction workers or transport workers, might be exposed to more pollution due to their work, but also living conditions, so overcrowding, proximity to major roads or other construction sites can expose people to higher levels of air pollution. And there are clear associations between exposure to air pollution and adverse health outcomes and things like deprivation as well. So there's the key point here is that air pollution affects everyone, but it's not an effect which is experienced equally or proportionally among populations. It's an environmental health inequity, and it has a disproportionate effect on certain groups. We need to do more to improve air quality in London and elsewhere globally. I've mentioned some of the headline statistics about how pollution affects populations, but clearly it has a direct and personal effect on people and their families. There's been a lot in the news lately since December about the tragic death of Ella Adu-Kisi-Debrah in 2013, who was a young girl who lived close to the South Circular in Lewisham, who had serious asthma, and ultimately, sadly, she died from a severe asthma attack. An inquest in December found that was directly attributable to exposure to air pollution. So for the first time, we have in the UK a situation where someone's terrible death has been directly associated with pollution. And there's a new kind of call to action for government, for local authorities and for public health and medical professionals to do more to improve air quality by setting stricter targets nationally, by improving public awareness about how everyone can reduce pollution and reduce our exposure to pollution, and ensuring that patients and people with existing conditions, like I mentioned, are provided with information about how they can try as best as possible to reduce any further risk from developing more serious health conditions from air pollution and poor air quality. And the next slide, please. Thank you. So where does pollution come from in London specifically? So, I mean, there's obviously lots of different sources of air pollution, all of them with kind of relatively more or less impact overall on the amount of pollution in the air in the city. But I've listed here the kind of the key contribution sources to air pollution in London. And the graphs on the right-hand side sort of show the kind of the relative contribution for two of the different types of pollution that I mentioned earlier on. So nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter, so the really small particles that can get deep into the lungs. And some prompts here to think about how these pollution sources relate to our everyday lives. So, road transport, as you can see, is the single biggest contributing factor to air pollution in London. and that's, diesel and petrol vehicles and electric vehicles on our roads. But, clearly we use vehicles all the time for commuting, for traveling, for work, for recreational travel. So our use of road transport and the pollution that comes from that has a serious impact on air quality in London, but it's not any one singular activity. It's the point I'm trying to make. But other key sources of pollution include, heating and powering our commercial buildings and our homes. So whether we have gas heating or we have wood fireplaces and wood stoves, commercial catering and restaurants has recently emerged as a key source of pollution in London as well. So things like wood pizza ovens and charcoal grills, as well as deep fat frying, can be huge contributors to particulate air pollution. Industrial processes are a major contribution as well. So manufacturing and the use of chemicals in dry cleaners, in nail salons and car workshops as well. Construction and development clearly is an enormous source of pollution as well in London. So there's lots of development happening everywhere. So use of heavy machines and braking materials releases pollution. And then other things like diesel trains, airports, and river traffic as well. There's lots of combustion engines in all those. So that, again, is clearly a source of pollution. And a final point I wanted to make here is that there's also a lot of pollution which comes into London from outside of the city, and in some cases outside of the UK as well. So it's not just that we can control or try to control pollution in London, improve air quality by reducing local sources. We also have to try and work with other levels of governance to reduce pollution from elsewhere as well. And just a quick note on indoor air quality. So, we spend generally about 90% of our time indoors, and the same types of pollution are found indoors as well as outside. So clearly environmental conditions inside our homes and workplaces and schools are important for our health and our well-being. But currently there's a lack of regulatory control for indoor air quality. And I think we expect to see that local authorities and government will increasingly need to support people at home, at school and elsewhere to take steps in understanding indoor air quality and its effect on our health, as well as making improvements to indoor environmental conditions. And I think my final slide here, so just a quick reference to some existing resources out there for indoor air quality, just to finish on. So at Camden Council, we've produced a guide for indoor air quality in homes. There's also a really fantastic, quite detailed guide from Besa and Mitsubishi, which is looking at indoor air quality in more detail about ventilation systems and that kind of thing. So if you're looking at, if you're in the business of designing buildings, or you're looking at making changes to a workplace, this is a really useful resource, as well as the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence as well. There's some really useful information on there about where indoor pollution comes from and how we can try and mitigate that. So generally speaking, I've some key points about how to make, how to improve indoor air quality and to help others understand why it's such an important thing for health. Given that more people are working from home, more people are potentially at risk due to air pollution, due to COVID vulnerabilities and being in overcrowded spaces, being less active. So clearly, a lot to learn and a lot to improve on. I think that's my final slide. I've rushed through that, but I hope that's a good introduction to why air pollution is so important.
Thank you so much, Tom. No, that was so helpful and really clear understanding of the pollutants that we're facing and where they're coming from. And just to and also indoor air pollution, because I think people just don't even consider that. I know I didn't until it came on my radar. So, but yeah, just to tie in air pollution with what's going on in the world in terms of climate change, and essentially a lot of the things that are creating air pollution are also the same things that are contributing to climate change. So agriculture, creates ammonia and methane emissions. Transportation, as Tom mentioned, both locally and also airplanes and boats and shipping, they're huge contributors of air pollution and also climate change, greenhouse gases. So it's the global warming is coming from these chemicals being emitted in all these processes. So even though we're talking about air pollution today, the things that we do and the impact that we're making also has this bigger contribution to the state of our world as it is. So with that being said, what we're going to do is break out into our breakout rooms and go into this activity. So what I've planned for you is a activity where we will kind of dissect some of the key parts of our day and think about how and why they're contributing to air pollution and what kind of solutions are there. So you have a couple of facilitators in each of your groups who will help guide you along on this journey. And then we're all going to reconvene in about 15-20 minutes to discuss what we've come up with and hopefully take forward some solutions from there. So Sally, whenever you're ready, feel free to split us all up and we will reconvene in 20 minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah, I hope everyone was doing well and enjoying their conversations. I know we were just kind of getting caught into things and there was a lot to unpack. But so what we're going to do now is actually I'll share the screen and we'll go through the mirror board and we're going to go around to each group and just kind of have you, one of the facilitators or even a volunteer from the group, just kind of share the highlights from each one. So we can kind of go through a day in the life and see what we've devised as kind of problem zones and solutions. So I'm just share my screen again and let's see, we're going to go over into group one, which is David and Ollie. You guys got lots down, which is fantastic. One of you want to dive in and tell us what you discussed and what kind of key points?
Who wants to do it?
Yeah, just to note, my note taking was a bit all over the place because I was too busy listening sometimes. So probably
that's okay.
The best up there.
Yeah, I'm happy to shoot if not Ollie. Like we Julie was the only person who participated, so it was but really fascinating. I think we raised two things. So we had home and then we had breakfast. And one was how we heated the home. So Julie mentioned she used a combi boiler, and we talked around, you know, how this. I think Julie was acknowledging that maybe that has a greater impact on climate, maybe turning to electric or more sustainable goods. But we also steered it around to using gas then for cooking and the exhaust from your combi boiler, and maybe just thinking about how that could impact your local air pollution. So. And things like possibly increasing ventilation when you maybe have a log burner on, or not using a log burner, or increasing ventilation, opening the doors and windows when you're cooking, just so that you don't get that buildup of pollution indoors and allow it to spread out, was quite a simple solution. On breakfast, we had a really good talk around just coffee and how many things there are around coffee, from where the beans come from, what sort of milk you use, even how you cook it. Julie came up with a really good suggestion. She said she's recently found a local roaster of coffee beans who source them, I want to say from Rwanda. So actually from a lot of coffee suppliers, that's quite a short routing. It's from this side of the world at least. And she also mentioned that she uses oat milk, and being based in Scotland, she thought that might be really sustainable, but we weren't actually too sure maybe where those oats were coming from. Julie suggested maybe Scandinavia. So yeah, a lot of considerations, but the outcome from coffee was actually looking at your supply chain and buying what you know.
Okay, fantastic. Well, it sounds like a really good conversation. Yeah, the coffee thing is quite a conundrum because the same really applies to tea, and most of it's actually coming from quite far abroad because we don't grow it in the UK, as you can imagine. But like you said, Rwanda, kind of Ethiopia, Kenya, the actual kind of chunk of the African continent is a shorter mileage than getting it from South America or East Asia, which, not to say that you want to boycott the coffee coming from there, but if you could choose somewhere with smaller emissions, then that is definitely an option. Okay, so group 2, who would like to cover this section, which we had here was the commute to work and the office environment. So again, looking at indoor.
So hello, Natalie. I was in with Avrilia, and then we had Becky and Joy, and we didn't get a lot, we didn't finish because you kind of get into the conversations and you just don't want to stop. But some key points, I guess, to pull out from our discussions was, when we're thinking about our commute to work, it's thinking about the sources of pollution, how we can reduce that pollution, but then also how do we also need to think about our exposure and how we reduce that exposure. So obviously driving in a vehicle using busy roads, that's going to be a source of pollution. The busier the roads around rush hour time, that's going to obviously increase the amount of emissions, peaks in air pollution. And so active travel is obviously a great solution, but then we need to also be aware that, for example, the tyres of bikes can be a source of air pollution in minuscule amounts, but it will still create something. And then also thinking about not just travelling to work, but travelling for work, travelling from office to office, but also about, for example, Becky is in healthcare and they have to use a lot of couriers to transfer samples, etc., from location to location, and those samples might require specialist vehicles that have kind of are refrigerated, for example, so there might not be a choice of using something else, and that could be a bad source of air pollution. But then also made the point of trains, overground and underground trains, they can be a surprising source of our particulate matter. And so we need to think about our own exposure when we're using alternative modes of transport. And then we also highlighted how the people that have to then deal with the air pollution, for example, on underground trains, they have to clean the underground daily in order to manage the levels of particulate matter that are created. And so those people that are cleaning, we need to be mindful of providing them with barriers and protection so that they're being exposed to the least amount of particulate matter, breathing in the least amount possible. So as well as choosing non-polluting transport, it's also about creating barriers so you're not breathing as much in as well. And then I guess office environment is very similar to home environment in terms of the considerations that you need to take, and then the solutions. Had a great suggestion about it's really important that we raise awareness. A lot of people in the office might not be aware of their particular actions, how they use the kitchen will be creating air pollution. And so as much as having solutions, we need to raise awareness so people know what actions to take in order to do something about it. I'll stop waffling on.
No, that was great. It sounds like a really good conversation, and a lot of detail about the commute, which is so important because the commute is a huge part of contribution, as we saw from the group earlier. So, okay, I'm going to, now we're down at Tom and Rachel's group. So either one of you want to chime in and let us know what you came up with. You were looking at lunch and online ordering.
Yeah, we were, yeah. Thanks, Dad. So on the subject of lunch, which is a great subject, the kind of the main problems that we're talking about were kind of threefold really. So the food miles, so where food is produced, how it's transported and how far it's transported, as well as how it's packaged as being kind of sources of air pollution, not necessarily in London, but definitely sources of pollution which can affect people at the point of production and transportation, as well as the people who are involved, I suppose, in transporting food. We thought about you've already mentioned the impacts of coffee and tea production, and the huge distances that those products and commodities are transported to where they're consumed in the UK. As well as we had a discussion about how food is cooked and prepared as well as being kind of a major thing which influences local air pollution, and how therefore our choices about what we eat and how it's cooked can affect pollution and health. So, examples about like charcoal grills or wood pizza ovens or gas ovens or deep fat frying, which are, we know to be major sources of particulate matter, which can affect people's health. So, if there's a food truck or kind of street food market, which is becoming increasingly popular, and it has kind of methods of food preparation which are really bad for health, there's the demand for those types of products can influence how much they're done. So kind of having an awareness of what our lunch choices can do for air quality and health is important. Some of the solutions we talked about, so kind of an interesting discussion about certification schemes. So we see this kind of more of a drive towards some food products having carbon footprinting or water or land footprinting labels and identifiers on the products as being a useful way of enabling some kind of consumer choice for those who want to try and select products which have a less significant impact on climate. We could look to do a similar sort of thing with air quality. Obviously, it's enormously complex when you have to balance the transportation, the food preparation, and the kind of various other factors which influence the polluting effect of foods. But a start to enable people to start making informed choices about what they eat for their lunch and how that can affect air quality and health. And then just moving on to the other thing which we were talking about, which was online deliveries. So, we had the point that generally speaking, online orders are all kind of delivered in vehicles. Often they're vans, which are probably diesel. Sometimes it's in cars. So some delivery courier companies now seem to just allow people to use their own vehicles. And, a lot of the time, probably people aren't able to afford to buy the most efficient, least polluting vehicles. So you have people who are driving around professionally, probably exposed to quite a lot of pollution, who aren't really that able to make changes to their vehicles. Obviously, people ordered a lot more stuff during the pandemic. So I know personally, I'm kind of ashamed to say that we had quite a few online orders throughout the last 12 months. And there's also kind of it's almost a kind of an expectation now that we can get things almost instantaneously within the next 24 hours or the 48 hours. And there was kind of an extreme example of a company that you can order a single coffee to your door from this company. So we kind of pushed the idea of instant gratification in online orders to the extreme. And some of the solutions really. So I think one of the most compelling points here was that it's a real balance of the need for everybody. So corporates, policymakers, and individuals to take responsibility for trying to understand and mitigate the amount of pollution that we produce from online orders. So companies who, online retailers or courier companies shouldn't default to providing near instantaneous deliveries. It shouldn't be the case that things are by default sent out to us as soon as they're available. It should be more efficient and based upon, when a full vehicle can be, sent around on a route to deliver lots of things to lots of people, rather than, do we really need to get something delivered to us as soon as possible? Probably not. We talked about, mentioned kind of just generally ordering less stuff, which feeds into the kind of the demand to try and be less consumerist and to consume less raw materials for a wider beneficial impact on the environment. And we talked about the kind of, you know, if we are getting things ordered or if we do need stuff, then are there alternatives? So, you know, it's nice to go and shop in person in shops or in the high street to support local businesses. If we're not able to get things from local businesses, are we able to get things from click and collect points or from lockers or, you know, collection points? But there's also a really good point about the fact that in some cases, online orders and delivery vehicles represent a more efficient way of getting goods and products to people as well. So, you know, an example being that if you live in a rural area and you need to drive 10 miles to pick up something, it's potentially more efficient and less polluting if a kind of a relatively modern delivery vehicle or a post office vehicle, which is doing a route of lots of different deliveries, delivers that thing to you rather than you driving there and back to collect something. So it's all about understanding what the best option is specific to the situation and what it is that we're needing to order, really. So yeah, I mean, a really, really interesting, really useful discussion.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, no, the delivery conundrum is really something that we're facing much more of these days. So finally, I'm just going to wiggle over to the penultimate group, and I know we're running a little quick on time, so we'll have to try and do a speed version. But this is Laura and Paul, I believe, who talked about commute home and about dinner. So Laura and Paul, do you want to kind of summarize real quick what you guys talked about?
Yeah, I think we've kind of touched on what some people have already said about kind of not taking the car as much, buying cleaner cars, walking more. I think the main points that came out of our breakout session was actually how families get more involved as a whole, whether it's on the commute or the school run. The plan of School Street from our group was really keen on the fact that the school, but I think also making sure that every different type of person is involved in infrastructure changes as well. So maybe someone with a disability might need more help in certain areas than others. For dinner, it was looking at more veggie meals in the week, so less meat consumption. Julie was actually making dinner for the kids whilst on the breakout session, so being a part of that as well as cooking at the same time, very, very well managed. Looking at, Penny was already using Oddbox as well, so looking at food waste and what happens there. And just the traditional picking up your takeaway from your local restaurant rather than potentially getting a delivery. So going old school a little bit on that. But yeah, no, some really good points and really interesting stuff.
Amazing. Thank you, Laura. And I'll just really briefly touch on ours, and then we'll go over to David with some other things. But we basically actually got caught up in the dinner conversation, so didn't even make it to the travel holiday times, but I will make sure to provide some resources for everyone in the toolkit that we'll send around after, but we really touched on similar things, eating and reducing your meat, you know, picking a takeaway restaurant that's close to you, or going and walking and cycling to get your food. So really fantastic. Thank you everyone for all your input. What we're going to do now is move on over to David, who is going to talk to us about monitoring and how monitoring could be used in helping to reduce our air pollution. So without further ado, David, it's your call here. Can everyone see his presentation on the slide? I'll just make it big again.
I can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Steph?
Yeah, you're fine, David. I will mute myself and away you go.
Thanks, everyone. 5 minutes is a really short time to talk about this topic, so I will blast through. Can you stop the screen? Just to give it a little context that, yeah, I'm Dave Green. I've worked in environmental monitoring for about 8 years, and Earthsense as a company, we stemmed out from Leicester University in about 15 years research. I won't really talk about the facts here because we've talked about that already, but we developed solutions to help our clients see air quality in the present time so that they can use that data to try and make decisions as they happen. Do you mind just changing screen stuff? A little bit of a pitch. We've got two core products. One's a small form sensor. These are becoming really popular. And we've got MapAir, which is a near real-time pollution model. And for anyone unfamiliar, a model is a computer simulation where we use inputs and different emission data and meteorology to try and predict pollution at ground level at a very tight resolution across different urban environments. Stop screen, real. So talking about air pollution and monitoring in the UK, we're primarily talking, as Tom suggested earlier, about a finite amount of pollution, pollutants, so NO2 particulates. And there are different types, but the three up here are probably the most commonly used. For those local authorities and regulators, they have to primarily provide compliant measurements. They have to be submitted in a way which is fully traceable and fully accountable. And the most commonly used one for reference for real-time monitoring is a reference station like that on the left-hand side, although this is a quite odd-looking one, if I'm honest. In here is going to be an analyzer primarily for each pollutant. There will be calibration gases. The whole enclosure will be maintained at a steady temperature. And they provide a really accurate measurement, often with a good time resolution, so every hour. But possibly one of the downfalls of them is you can't place this everywhere. You can't put these all the time in a school or at a traffic junction. In the middle, we've got another certified method. So this is a diffusion tube. And these are a really easy method to follow. And a lot of community action groups will also use these. So this tube there, you unfix the cap on it, it will start to absorb NO2. And then at the end of your monitoring period, you send it off to the lab and you get a good level of measurement for NO2 during that period. The slight downfall on these potentially is you don't get a real-time resolution. So you're only getting an average of NO2, which means you can't see the spikes in pollution, which are potentially the most damaging part. And then on the right-hand side are small form sensors. So these are really becoming popular. The reason for that is they can be deployed in most places because they're quite small, they're low powered. But something really important to understand here is they're an indicative measurement. What they are providing is an estimation. The accuracy can be good on them, but really they should be used for understanding trends rather than saying this is the exact concentration which we need to measure. Do you mind sliding screen? So why is probably the wrong question. Here's a little bit more of what we've worked with some communities to bring in different systems. So working with Leicester, the reason I think monitoring needs to be combined in a more complex architecture is because if you take a look at a lot of places in the UK, the reference grade monitoring which is deployed is quite small. It doesn't cover many places. Leicester here, the black lines show their air quality management area, and the triangle shows one reference AURN station at the university, and that just doesn't really provide us enough information at street level. Slide along, please, Dad. So with them, we've deployed a sensor network. We've deployed this at strategic locations, hospitals, outside railways, primary schools. And this then starts to give us that indicative information to understand how pollution is going up and down, you know, what's happening as the day goes on, what happens when a lockdown comes in, is there anything, are our strategies having an effect? Slide along, please, there. And then on top of this, we've built a CFD model, so a computational fluid dynamic model for the city. And this then really fills in the gaps. So we're taking in their traffic data, industrial emissions, and predicting where air is flowing around the city, how it's flowing between buildings. And Stab, if you go across one, this zooms in slightly. This then gives us a prediction, so it's not necessarily as accurate, but a really good understanding of air pollution, door by door, street by street. And then we can start to present that to the community through different media, so we can start to tell them what their exposure is, give them forecasting about what is coming in the next few days, give them advice off the back of it. And the local authority can actually start using it in strategy development, whether that's controlling transport more intelligently or trying to assess their strategies moving forward. And if we skip to the last slide, I'm probably over, so apologies. One, I wanted to make it more relevant to London. Oh, back one, please. Newham, and this is a really good use case of sensors. And like I say before, you've got to be really cautious with how you use sensors. Don't ask for advice, talk to your local community, talk to your local people like Tom, get advice from them on what is good and what you can use them for. But a good case scenario here is Newham. They used 8 Zephyrs at 8 schools to understand what the levels of NO2 were, and then see if the strategies they were implementing were being effective. So bringing in things like a green wall to try and scrub pollution from it coming onto the playground, or timed road closures, or, you know, the famous low traffic neighborhoods. I won't say much more about that, but they then used the Zephyrs to actually evaluate whether they were effective. And then from an educated point of view with an evidence base, they rolled out the lessons they learned to the 96 primary schools across the borough. So that's me. That summarizes it up. And yeah, to talk about monitoring, I think it is, you've got to look holistically at it. You've got to consider the method which you're taking. And if you're uncertain, research it. Talk to your local environmental health teams, talk to academics. Don't just go to Amazon, buy an AQ sensor and expect that it is going to give you the perfect result.
Thank you, David. That was really interesting to hear about monitoring and its use cases. So lastly, we're just going to hear from Natalie Curd from Idling Action London, which is a fantastic campaign. I know we've run a few minutes over, so if you have to leave, that's quite all right. We'll send you links and everything in the follow-up. But yeah, Natalie, if you wanted to share your screen on your end?
Yes.
Okay, so you should be able to do that.
Yes.
Perfect.
She'll do that now, and I will try and keep it to just a couple of minutes long. So yeah, I am one of the project officers delivering a London-wide Mayor of Air Quality funded project, Idling Action London, and it's a 3-year project, and the main aim simply is raising awareness about vehicle engine idling as a source of avoidable air pollution. And it's a partnership of 31 local authorities, so pretty much all of the local authorities in London. And we do various activities in order to raise awareness. So we do idling action events. This is the main way, before COVID hit, that we would directly engage with drivers that are idling in hotspots that have been identified by the local authorities. Most of these hotspots are around primary schools. So we would train volunteers to act as air quality champions. These were students from the schools, parents, governors, or community members, and they would be the ones that would go out and speak directly to these drivers. And we found this was a really effective way of getting the drivers to immediately change their behaviour, and then hopefully think about always changing their behaviour in the future. And then we also have a fleet programme called our Engines Off campaign, and we have a range of toolkits to support businesses and fleet operators across London to make really simple changes so that they are tackling vehicle emissions and getting them to pledge publicly that they will always switch their engines off. It's such a small thing to do, switching their engines off, but it will make an immediate difference to air pollution levels. And it's an easy thing for people to get their head around. So it's a nice introductory kind of action that you can take. And then it gets people in the conversation so that you can then think about other things, other sources of air pollution and other actions that can be taken. And yes, these are just some more pictures from our schools programme. So we go into the schools and we deliver workshops to students, and we get them to think about sources of air pollution, their own exposure to air pollution, and what they can do to take action against that and get people to change their behaviour. So all about pester power. So we expect these students to go home and tell their parents not to be driving to school and leaving their engines idling, waiting to pick them up So finally, we have just finished a London-wide advertising campaign to try and link the public health impacts of air pollution related to idling vehicles. So we created some hard-hitting images that were on billboards, online, and we also had a radio campaign as well. And we hopefully will be repeating this later in the year. So our project runs on getting as many people aware and supporting us and taking part. And there's lots of different things that you can do to take part. Just some of these on the screen now. The best thing to do is to go to our website where you can find lots of different resources, toolkits that you can download. You can direct your businesses to visit us, and we can support them with resources. You can become a volunteer to work with us at hopefully future idling action events, or you can ask your school or business to pledge to switch their engines off with us. So if you're a parent and you want us to visit your school and do some workshops with the students, we can certainly do that. I just want to leave, I'm going to stop sharing because I'm just going to share my different screen. So this is the website, idlingaction.london, nice and simple. And here you'll find all resources. You can download a supporter pack from our advertising campaign, which gives you all of the resources in order to send emails to people with these hard-hitting images in. We've got a video that could be shared in like a newsletter with your business or with your school. But finally, I just want to play our advertising video. We found that this had the best response of all of the different advertising things that we did. This seemed to grab people's attentions the most and get people talking, which is what we need. We need more people talking about air pollution. So I'm just going to finish, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to hear the sound on this with playing our very short video. And I would encourage you to share this. It's available on YouTube. There we are.
Thank you for sharing that, Natalie. Yeah, that was really fantastic. There's a bit of chat going on that I wanted to see if you had any contribution to, Natalie. I know we're wrapping up here, but Peter said that switching off may increase emissions in some circumstances, making the front of school's car route be far more effective. Obviously, that's a little harder to push, but I don't think we could challenge that. But do you know how much harm the pollution inside the car, or do they know how much harm the pollution inside the car is doing to their own children? Tom pointed out that Idling Action commissioned a research project to look at comparative emissions of switching off and on again versus 30 seconds of idling, and it found that leaving the engine running produced about twice as much CO2 and nitrogen NOx as switching off and on again. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, Natalie, or anyone else who's coming from the air pollution side of things.
I think Tom has. I was going to reference the research that we did in support of this campaign that found that switching off and on again is definitely better. I'd be interested to hear from Peter about what circumstances he thinks switching off may increase emissions, but maybe that's for an offline chat. thank you for everyone commenting that they loved the campaign.
Thank you. Yes, Joy. Joy is asking if the research is linked on the website, Natalie.
It is, yes.
It is. Okay, and I'll make sure to send a clear link to it in our follow-up toolkit or in the email, so it's highlighted so people can look into that. Peter, if there's anything you'd like us to share as well, I can send you my email and you can forward me any research or links that you think would be useful, because then I can pass them along to the group. So I will just drop my email in the chat. But essentially we're wrapping up here. So the last thing is really just to kind of ask, are there any actions that, you know, people want to take or commit to, having kind of discussed all these different ways that we contribute to air pollution, or actions contribute to air pollution. So just thinking, what actions are you going to take to alleviate air pollution moving forward? If anyone has anything or thinks of anything now, they're welcome to drop it in the chat. Otherwise, you know, you're always welcome to get in touch with us, or just take it as a kind of food for thought moving forward, and you know, with the things that you're doing to help practice being a good steward to our environment. And lastly, I just want to thank Sally for coordinating these workshops for me, and all of our wonderful facilitators for your help today. And I hope you all enjoyed the conversations that you had, and your participation was much appreciated. So that's it now. I'll hang around if anyone has any questions, but otherwise, thank you for coming, and hopefully you'll join us for the next one, which will be on plastic pollution in one form or another in about 3 months' time. So thanks, everyone.